And now let's take together a collective breath and let's exhale it as well. So many people, so many beloved people. I am glad that in this era of tiny little headsets and ever-present personal entertainment bubbles that people might be walking around in, that a person smiling to themselves doesn't look that odd. A person talking to themselves in today's world doesn't actually look that strange or unusual. And I'm glad, because especially in this time of year, I feel the presence of so many, especially those whose spiritual home was this congregation. Somehow I'm always feeling them when I'm driving around through the different towns, remembering last conversations or first conversations or particularly meaningful conversations. I remember a joke or a kind of humor, and that's where I start smiling, imagining the jokes that might be made if they were riding shotgun with me in that moment. And sometimes I'm smiling, and every now and then, those tears start to come. On Friday, in a conversation about our UU values with our national leaders in our faith, I found myself on the literal edge of tears because one of the friends who I lost these last 2 years, who was supposed to be pictured in our show, was Alandria Williams, and E wrote the charter for that work that we're now doing as an association and drove some of us a little wild while they were doing it. Maintaining our relationships with the departed is a human need, as ancient as those that arose when the ancestors looked up at the sky and wondered about life's expansiveness, and those who have experienced the excruciating break that is the loss of the physical presence of someone that you love, no matter how that love turned out in the end, can be catapulted into a new exploration with those they love, members of an amazing new federation of mourners, a club who, in my experience, members of which laugh as much as they cry together when they are gathered. The world's wisdom traditions give a special place at the spiritual table for those who face grief. Grief comes about because of a loss, and it can be the loss of a beloved or not even so beloved human being. And people can experience grief at the shocking disappointment or the loss of an ideal or of a satisfying experience or position or job or of a well-functioning body. Or, as we have all experienced in these last years since we have been able to do this service together in person, some of us, a loss and change in just the nature of the status quo. Most of those wisdom traditions tell us to keep a door ajar, an ear open for further dialogue with what or who has been left behind, especially with our beloved dead, because these relationships are not static if we allow ourselves to remember and stay engaged with them. Psychologist William Worden, who has written much about grief, believes that mourners have 4 tasks, and their ability to approach and undertake these tasks determine whether the grief will be the beginning of a new journey or whether it will be a sad half-life in a past one. Worden says the tasks are to accept the reality of the loss, experience its pain, adjust to the fact that this loss is real, and find an ongoing connection with that which is now gone. Accepting the loss is a gradual process, which is why annual rituals such as this one matter, and there are people who have asked to stay in our procession year after year, and that is a good part of their journey. As one writer summarizing Worden writes, some denial can serve a purpose in that it allows you to slowly absorb the full weight of the loss. However, remaining or idling in denial is the antithesis of acceptance. You must confront your own denial and accept that loss has occurred. Acceptance is the surrendering to reality as it is. Similarly, experiencing the pain of grief Avoidance compounds that pain. Experiencing the pain of what we have lost, though we may try to avoid it at all costs, and some literally lose their lives trying to avoid it, actually allows us to move through the pain and on to something else. Walden says, adjusting to an environment with the deceased missing is essential, even though it can seem disloyal. Perhaps in some ways, we are all experiencing that with our efforts to hold on to the life that existed prior to 2020. Those who have not made this adjustment and yet who still keep trying to return and return and return to that which no longer exists are the ones assaulting airline staff and essential workers. And finally, finding an enduring connection with the deceased while embarking on a new life. For if you stay in dialogue with it, those who study such things say, as well as our wisdom traditions, you will continue to receive the gifts of those relationships from your dead, no matter what your relationship was when they were alive. And I'm grateful to Michael for sharing from their cultural tradition, the wisdom traditions of an ancient people. And as our Time for All Ages demonstrated, they're often juxtaposed with the sadness of loss and the joy of living. Dias de los Muertos is a ritual that is about joy and connection, celebrating the pleasures of life with the departed. And rituals such as this All Souls Day exist as a stopgap, a placeholder in a dominant culture which shuns grieving and only wants us to move in a kind of neutral middle. At these times, we're surrounded by an amount of loss which is inconceivable, and the instinctive need is to push away our own personal losses, which can seem very seductive. And yet these traditions, like the now deceased people who ride shotgun with me through the streets of Contra Costa County and tell a few jokes as we drive, suggest that we can do otherwise, and that we need to do otherwise, and that we need to do it together. These rituals, which are found in so many traditions, including the Confucian culture, the pagan culture, and of course, the Christian culture from which we get All Souls, allow us to hold together what we may not be able to hold alone. The pain of knowing that the world has changed, and also that we have to move forward, as we talk about in our grief group almost every month. So, in an interesting twist of fate, some of the pictures that didn't show up this morning were the ones that I had placed in the show this morning. And as I put them in there, I recognized what I had recognized intellectually in a different way, placing the picture of each of them in the procession. That many of the friends who I've lost, in fact, the vast majority of the friends I lost in the last 2 years were Black. And E and Chester reminded me when they were alive, and remind me as a voice in my ear now, that it's not incidental, and that I better watch myself now, because now they're my ancestors, and they can get me. And I remember how they always wanted to share their tradition of pouring a libation, and how E always wanted to do it into a plant, because she didn't want to waste the water, and several times in hotel settings that meant she watered a plastic plant. Poor people in East Palo Alto, until a few months before he died, knew what Chester knew, which was that the extra pain of what has happened because of the health disparities has caused what columnist Marissa Evans calls the Black bereavement crisis. So that means that it's important for us to recognize the different ways that cultures hold what it is that we all have to experience, knowing that sometimes there are extra layers upon that. And that gets to a part of our universalist history, which is our dialogue with our departed, which allows them to continue to be part of their journey, even when we can't do it in real time, face to face. In this way, our ancestors remain on that path of redemption, which we believe is open to all, and we as well, in our relationships with them, remain on that path as well. By continuing our dialogue with those who have died, we shift the balance away from pain and into that joyous celebration of these now gone lives. We can remember them by cooking their favorite meals, by creating art to honor them, by carrying a keepsake with us. There is the indigenous tradition of having a giveaway to summon generosity in their spirit. We can create an altar. We can light a candle. We can write them a letter. Rituals and remembrances I have come to see after presiding over scores of memorials here in this congregation are not foolish superstition. The tasks of grieving are to integrate our loss into our lives and create an ongoing connection with the people who have died, while also finding a way to continue to live. So I will keep on laughing and talking to those that ride with me in the car as I move around this county, remembering them and growing with them as I grow. In the words of the Sufi poet from the Muslim mystical tradition of Sufism, Rumi has this to say: be sorrowful, be full of sorrow, that you may become full of joy. Weep, that you may break into laughter. What hurts you blesses you, for darkness is your candle.